Have you ever questioned which weekly layout is truly best for you? If you are the type of person who has purchased a planner, set it up with all the pretty deco and stickers, used it for 2 weeks only to realize it's just not working, this video may be for you. Hey, it's Kim, and I'm back with a video today all about weekly layouts. I have been fortunate enough to find a weekly layout that works perfectly for me, at least in this season of my life. I am not so delusional to believe that this weekly layout will always work for me, but it's working for me right now. But that was honestly only after a few years of trial and error. I was into bullet journaling for a few years, so I'm no stranger to actually drawing out all of my weekly layouts, and that afforded me the opportunity to embrace what I loved about the layout, toss whatever wasn't working, shift some things around to see and figure out what works best for me. Now, I truly understand and appreciate that not everyone has the time or the energy for bullet journaling and for drawing out all of your weekly spreads, but luckily for you, I've got the time. So that is the current project I've been working on for the past few weeks. I thought it would be really cool to use a few weekly layouts, probably more than a few. There's 6 in total, so several weekly layouts in my actual planner, live through them, work through them, suffer through some of them to actually go through and see what some of the pros and some of the cons might be in order to best identify who each weekly layout might work best for. I've tested out some common weekly layout spreads that you may have seen around the planner community and some others that are not so common. At least I don't think they are. Maybe you might think they are, but we'll see. We'll just go through all of them to see how they play out over the course of an entire week of an actual life that is lived, seeing how each section of the weekly layout does function. And all weekly layouts are not equal. I repeat, they're all not equal, which is why I do think it's very important to understand what you like best in your planner in general, but especially as it relates to a weekly layout, what works best for you, what doesn't, and go from there. I think definitely if you are armed with that knowledge, you will do amazingly well in choosing the planner that's best for you and actually sticking to using it. So let's do it. All right, so let's get started on the first weekly layout that I'm testing out for the month of February. As you can see, it's already set up, which will not be typical for the ones going forward. I will walk you through how I'm setting those up, why I'm setting those up, and everything. But I figured we would start at like point A. So this is my usual weekly layout, and this is what I call my timeline layout. It's not a true or strict timeline necessarily, but that's just the name I've come to giving it over the past year and a half that I've been using it. So it is based on the vertical structure, but it doesn't go along with the times on the planner. So why do I call it timeline? I don't know. That's just the name that I gave it. But the way I set it up, I do have the section in the middle. I consider this the working time. So this is the working time of each day. And I will put things in order of how they happened, but not necessarily at the specific time that they happen. And this is a setup that I use that is not sort of prescribing how I want the week to go. It's kind of a mixture of both. So of both prescribing how I want the week to go and then a reflection of how it actually went. So I'll set it up, and there might be things that are day specific, and I'll put those up along the top. Oh, and also I do have videos showing exactly how I'll put this kind of timeline or layout together, and I'll have those linked down below and up in the cards for you. I just figured I wouldn't waste the time here since I've been doing it forever, and if you are not new to the channel, you have seen me do this time and time again. But for those who may be new, hi, thank you for joining us. Don't forget to like and subscribe if you're liking, this kind of vibe that we have going on here. But I figured I would still walk you through why I do what I do. So up at the top, I do have a section for day specific items. So this is where I will put For instance, laundry gets done on Wednesdays. Today is a Wednesday. I need to do laundry, but laundry gets done on Wednesdays. I usually will budget on a Friday. So I do have those things up along the top that are day specific. And then there's a section right below that that is for workouts. That's where I like to record what workout I'm doing. Now, this is a holdover, like I said, from about 1.5 years ago, where I like to document the workouts that I'm doing. Even though I do now have a health and fitness planner that I am documenting workouts in, I document workouts in detail there. Here, just a high level blurb or title of what I did for my workout for that day, or if it was just a rest day, I still will write that there. So that stays on this timeline layout for me. And then you get into the bulk. And like I said, this is the working section of the day. So maybe like a 9 to 5 type of section conceptually. This is the time that I'm actually at a desk, maybe at a computer, maybe even out of the house, just doing things that I would consider work for the most part. So when I set the week up, I will know which days I plan to work on which projects. So I may note that here. I'll know which days that I intend to maybe work outside of the home if I'm going to the library or wherever. I will note that here as well at the start of the week. Also, anything that is on my monthly layout, this is January, which today's the last day, but anything that is on my monthly layout, I will transfer over to here. Things that are confirmed appointments or confirmed events, that also goes into my timeline. And like I said, I put it in order of how I expect things to go, or the timeline that I expect things to follow. So if it's an evening event, for instance, like movie/game night with the kids, that's going to be towards the bottom of this timeline section because it's evening. If it's work, it's going to be up towards the top of this timeline section. So that's how I place things into the actual spread. And what this does is it allows me to see my schedule, like a high level view of what my schedule is for the entire week, but it also allows a lot of space for lists. And that's why I like this layout so much. I feel like on a weekly, I need not only to see my daily tasks, because I'm going to have a daily anyway. So if I were a person who didn't have dailies, I can understand how this entire weekly layout from top to bottom would be most beneficial to me. But because I have dailies, I don't need all of the detail for each and every day on this spread. I put that into my dailies. What I need is lists. So I need lists of tasks that I might have for the week. I need lists of cleaning areas that I'm going to do for the week. And this is repetitive. So some of the things aren't new. So like this cleaning list is the same exact cleaning list every single week, but it is a reminder kind of to myself. So when I have some gaps in here or some free time, because I am mostly working from home. So if I have some gaps and some free time during the day, I'm like, well, what can I clean here, or what needs a deep cleaning this week in general? So that's why I keep the cleaning list here. I did skip over this bottom line. So this bottom section here is where I note the dinners. So what dinners we have for that day, because I do find that part of like momming to be very, I don't know, not stressful, but tiring, right? To try and figure out like, well, what are we going to eat now? What are we going to eat now? And I'm trying not to repeat like the same things over and over and over. So anyway, I just like to make a note of what dinners we have. And I'm not making a note of what dinners we plan to have. I only write it in after the day has passed and I know what we actually had, because when I try to pre-plan the meals, it just never goes according to plan. And then I have to like cross things out and white out, and I'm not a fan of that. So I'll just write it down after the fact. And then if, let's say I'm planning the meals for the next couple of weeks, I can kind of go through what we have had already and not repeat anything, or say, oh, we haven't had X, Y, and Z in a very long time, and put that in my mental plan for what we're going to have for the week. Also down here, what I have been doing since the start of the year, and I did this last year, just not consistently, but I will note down like what books I'm currently reading. So a list of currentlies. So what books I'm currently reading, shows currently watching, if I'm currently listening to like a podcast or whatever, I'll note that down here as well. And that's pretty much just because I have this extra column in the common planner, which I didn't have previously. So I have this extra column and I'm just using up the space. So that's why that's there. So I call this general layout my timeline layout. And I touched on it a little bit, but this is good for those of us who need to know from a high level view what's going on for the week, but we don't need the granular details of every single day. And we also need to have space to note other things like a task list, like workouts, like meals, like a cleaning list, and we like to have it all in one central spot. So that is perfect for this kind of layout. But this is what the full week looks like, completely filled in. And yeah, there's some things that were filled in, some spots that were not. Doesn't look a whole lot different from the last time you saw it. But the next one I want to do is going to be the horizontal layout. I will say that for this project, this has been, which I mentioned in the intro, a labor of love. So something that I'm filming that is spanning several weeks in order to do like a compilation of all the things that I figured out. So what I did though, I went back to my planners from 2021. These are both from 2021. This is a Wonderland 222, and this is like a bullet journal TN type style thing that I put together. There's a video somewhere, but anyway, it was like in a bullet journal type of format, and I did a different weekly every single week for the most part back in my, you know, drawing out layouts kind of day. And it's primarily because I like to switch it up. I just like to do new things. So I couldn't commit to a planner that was already set up for me necessarily. And also because I like to see if certain things will work better than others. Like I'm not married to anything in particular. So I did go through and kind of flagged some things that I had done previously. And that is what's going to, or where I'm taking inspiration from for the layouts in this video. So the horizontal layout is what we are used to, you know, similar, well, I should say what we are used to if we're used to like a Hobonichi weeks. So I do know that the Common Planner comes in a horizontal layout in this size, which is the standard notebook size. So that's standard TN, if anyone's interested in that layout in general already. But a good thing about the Common Planner that I do truly appreciate for those of us who do like to switch things up, even though I pretty much had the same weekly layout, but there are no dark lines. So you can kind of customize it any way that you see fit. You can customize it any way you want. So I'll move these out of the way. But I'm going to be doing the horizontal layout for this first full week of February. So I considered this week February also because there are 4 days out of the 7 in the month of February. But this week, week number 6 is the first full week of February. And I'm going to do the horizontal layout. So I already did a little bit of math to determine where I am spacing out everything and where I'm going to draw it in. So I'll be using my Micron fine liner, and I'll use the 01 marker, which is 0.25 millimeters. So that's what I'll be using to draw out the lines for this example. I am particular about the lines in my planners. I don't like them to be too dark. It's a weird thing, and I get irritated when they are too dark. But anyway, so I'm gonna use this one, and I'm not going to complain if it tends or if it does come out too dark. So I did the math on this, and I think it was something like 7 boxes per day, and I believe that's just what I'm going to stick with. So the horizontal layout is exactly what it sounds. It's horizontal for each day, and I kind of messed that line up, but for each day of the week you have a horizontal box where you can write down whatever you need to write down. And I think when I did this, or when I counted out the boxes, it left me with fewer boxes for, or less height for Sunday, which is fine. I don't write a whole lot on Sunday anyway, or plan and schedule a whole lot, so I don't need that much space. But around about 7 boxes per day. that is the layout on the left hand side. And something that I'm using, I'm going to redate, so to speak, all of these weeklies, obviously, because I need to move like the days of the week and everything. I don't want those to interfere with what I've got going on. So I'm just going to white these out. I'm not going to make a big deal about it, but I'll white them out so that they don't like interfere with what I'm looking at. And I waffled a bit about whether I wanted to white this calendar out. I think I do. Because even though it's not dark, it's very unobtrusive. This is essentially where I'm starting my Monday and writing Monday things. So I don't want that there. Now, will I white out the 2? I'm going to white out the 2. I still got a 2 over here on this side. But just for continuity's sake, I will white out the 2. And I have some date stickers left over actually from last year that I'm going to use here to date all the days for this week. So I actually have these date stickers left over from my Sterling ink kit back in 2023. I didn't use these back then. I started using them in I think March of that year. So anyway, I have them for February, which is very convenient. So that is how I'm going to date all of these for the weeks going forward, any of them that I need to like redate. So this Monday is the 5th. So that's what I'll go in and do right now. So for the purposes of this video, I think I'm gonna do the setup first, right? Like the general setup of where things are gonna go, and then maybe I'll focus on adding more deco later. For this type of weekly layout, for the horizontal weekly, it allows you to have the entire left side of the page, or I'm sorry, entire right side of the page for notes, for lists, for whatever you want. It's usually not formatted in any particular way. As long as it has like lines so that I can write straight, I'm good. So what I plan to do for this one, like I said, I'm kind of using examples of what I did back in 2021 or similar to what I did back in 2021, which is, so I have my appointments and everything on the left hand side, so the day specific items, and then on the right hand side I had a task list, I had a section for dinners, workouts, a cleaning list, and a section to note down anything that's going on next week. So it's really a lot of the same information I'm keeping here, just in a different format. So I do find that, I think depending on the type of person you are, different formats work for your brain. This is another horizontal type layout that I did, and I guess the similarities would be, so I made a line down here. So make a line there, and anything that was day specific, I'll put, you know, on the corresponding day. Now that is good, I guess, for workouts and for the dinners, if there are days that I do both of those. So I think maybe for my setup for this week, I will do something like that. I think this is where a lot of people get a bit confused as it relates to the horizontal weekly, what to do with all this free space over on the right, because it definitely feels like a lot of free space. So I'm just going to make a line down here, and this will be the section where I write down those day specific items like the dinners or the workouts. And then over on the right hand side, I was thinking that I'm going to do a what do you call it, rolling weekly. So let's do that. Let's do like a rolling weekly. And the point of a rolling weekly is so that you can plan out which days you are going to attempt to do which tasks. You kind of determine which days you're going to focus on the specific tasks. So for example, using my, I'll title this week. Using what I mentioned earlier about how I do like specific things on specific days, like laundry gets done on Wednesdays, I will, using my ink for the month of February, I'm gonna write down as my first task laundry. And I know I'm going to just do a little dot on Wednesday because that's the day I would prefer to do laundry. All right, so that is the general framework for how I'm going to use this horizontal layout for this week, for the first full week of February. Again, I'm going to come back and add some deco, and I'm going to make it pretty and jazz it up and all of that, but that's the general layout for the horizontal weekly. And here's the finished horizontal layout. So I will tell you that I am not a fan of horizontal layout. I just don't like it. I don't like to use the word hate, but if I were a person who used the word hate, I would probably say that I hate horizontal layout. And there are reasons, which I'll go into, but this is the one, as I mentioned, we're most familiar with if you are familiar with Hobonichi Weeks. So you have the horizontal sections, but you can see how I added some deco, not a ton of deco, but I was able to add the deco, and then on the days I have my day specific tasks and appointments filled in, and I did only fill in the dinners over on this side. I thought about doing workouts in this area as well, but I decided against that and opted instead to put it in a list over here on the right, along with the cleaning areas on the right, and the specific days that I did clean those areas. So that's pretty clear, pretty straightforward. And then the section for next week at the bottom, along with the rolling weekly up at the top. I don't love a rolling weekly because I don't really know what day I'm going to do the task until that day gets there. So I don't like to, for instance, on like Sunday night, plan what I think I might be able to do on a Wednesday, because 9 times out of 10 it doesn't happen that way. So that's why I just don't prefer to use a rolling weekly, but it takes up a good amount of the space and it looks pretty. So this horizontal layout is great for someone who likes writing across the line, like all the way across the line. So the vertical layout can be limiting because it's a narrow space to write your task in. But if you need more space, if you have larger handwriting, or if you need more detail to write down more details about the specific task, the horizontal weekly would be great for you. What I find for me, I typically, without this section here, I typically only use half the page on a horizontal layout. So then it ends up with all of this space being completely bare and completely empty, and I just feel like it looks unfinished for the most part. So then I had started, when I was using this type of layout, doing 2 columns. So I might do like 1 column of tasks here and then a second column of tasks here. And that worked okay, but for days where I don't have a lot of day specific items, it still left a lot of empty space. And that's when I decided to start putting something that I knew would fill it in over on the left, so that that would allow me to not have to put it on the right. So I can reserve the right for other lists and other notes that I wanted to use and fill in. So that's the way I was able to make the horizontal weekly work for me. I could have also put in another section similar to these blocks here. Maybe like another section of blocks here with all of my workouts. That is something that I had done in my previous planners when I showed you and I flipped through all of those old weeklies. I did like a section for workouts here, and then that just moved all of the notes and tasks over on the right and just filled up the entire spread a whole lot more. So I think because I'm not able to fill in the entire spread, and maybe because I don't write detailed task lists, that's why the horizontal weekly does not work for me. But if you are the opposite, I think it will definitely work well for you. There are also a lot of people who do not like to write vertically, meaning you don't like to write things in lists going down. So for that reason, the vertical weekly would not be good for you, and you would like the horizontal weekly. But either way, this is a good way to make the horizontal weekly work for you if you need to, if you really want to put that planner to use that you purchased. This next one is actually one of my most favorite types of layouts, and it's something that I would call the dashboard layout. Not necessarily like the dashboard layout from Happy Planner, I think. Yeah, Happy Planner. But not too far off. It's kind of like a box 4 things. So that is, I keep moving the sticky note. I'll just leave it here for right now. So that's what I'm going to do for this week, for the 12th through the 18th of February. And I'll just get started on whiting out some of these things. So the general gist of this layout, I am creating boxes in the center, so kind of like rectangles for each day, and on the sides of the layout is where my lists and my notes and all of those other things that may not be day specific will go. And you may be thinking to yourself, well, Kim, why do you have only 6 boxes when there are 7 days? It's because for me, in this kind of layout, I'm okay grouping the weekend. Not everyone is. And in that case, I encourage you to make 8 boxes. So divide this side into 4 rectangles. They might look more like squares. And then you can have 1 for each of the 7 days of the week, and then an extra one maybe if you wanted to note down what's going on for the following week, or if you have something else that you would like to track or note on your layout. So on the sides, like I said, this is where my lists will go. So my list for those workouts, those dinners, the tasks that I have for the week, that is where I'm going to put all of that information. I'm just deciding where I want to put it. I think I want to put my tasks over here. Correction. Sorry. So this is what I consider to be my Bujo dashboard. So this is my bullet journal dashboard, or my bullet journal Bujo layout. This is not the dashboard layout. Yes. So this is something I would do in my bullet journaling days. I misspoke. I apologize for that. So then, getting into that bullet journal spread and how it shaped up by the end of the week, you can see I pretty much filled in a good portion of it. And one thing that was brought back to my memory as I was using this throughout the week is that this spread would be great for people who don't use dailies. And that was the primarily the time that I use this type of layout, and I'll explain why. So each box does afford you a lot of space to write tasks for each day, with the exception of the weekend box where I have 2 days in one box. You do get a lot of space to write out any appointments and tasks for that day. And you're also able to, after you've set up the weekly and maybe you're actually living in the week, like by Wednesday or so, you can still come back and add additional tasks. Throughout the week, you have that space available. Sometimes a lot of the other weeklies, and maybe even like a horizontal weekly, for instance, you don't have a lot of lines. So after you filled in, let's say about 5 tasks or so, you can't really add any more for that specific day. Maybe you'll add like a sticky note in there. But for this type of layout, you do have that additional space. So this is great for those of us who don't like to use dailies. When I was using this layout, I would only use dailies on days that were extremely busy. Days where either the tasks would overflow from here, or there were a lot of little details or little tasks, subtasks, so to speak, that were related to the higher level things that I needed to get done for the day. That's when I would switch over to using a daily. But once I started using a daily all the time in my regular planning, this layout didn't work as well for me. I didn't find the need to have such a large amount of space for each day. But this layout is great because it does give you a lot of space for each day, and you do also have the additional sides on either side of the layout for your notes and for your lists and for other things. So the way I set mine up, I do have dinners listed here, workouts over on the bottom left, a task list over on the top right, and I made sure to leave a lot of space for tasks. I did put in this large deco sticker because I figured, well, for me, I know I don't like to leave myself a ton of space for task lists because I will absolutely fill it in. And then by the time Friday rolls around, I will be so stressed out that like only 3 of these tasks have been checked off, and that causes way too much anxiety. So in order to limit myself to not fill in that task list so much, I did put a large deco sticker there. And then I have this section over on the bottom right for any reminders for next week. Now, usually in my regular daily planning, I don't allow for a next week section, primarily because I already have all the weeks set up. So if I needed a reminder for, let's say, week 13 of the year, I would just put a sticky note here. So I don't typically use a next week section, but this is great for a bullet journal type of spread where maybe you're not setting up or even drawing in the layout for the following week until that week gets here. So I did really enjoy using this spread, and it did come in handy, and it reminded me of a lot of reasons for why this one would be great and a lot of reasons why I used it for such a long time when I was bullet journaling. So the next one we're going to do though is the dashboard layout. Now, this one is a little more complicated, not complicated, just a bit more involved with all of what gets shown on this actual spread. It's a lot. And I do feel like it's like a true dashboard for the entire week. It's a lot of info presented in a small amount of space. And like I said, I was looking for examples of how I do this or how I did this in the past. So it started like this. So a very small section for the daily tasks. And then I would use the other space for all of my lists. And over here I had the rolling weekly as well. So I have a few examples of this in the Wonderland 222, and this is a B6 size. But I found that the width of this was a little bit too much for that kind of layout. So then I started doing it when I switched to the Traveler's Notebook size. I switched to this kind of layout over here. And I will say I took inspiration for this, like adding this timetable, from Paper Test Design. She had the Rachel Weekly, I think it was called back then, which now her weekly notebook planners are this layout for the most part. Just things are a little bit moved around. And this kind of evolved. I feel like I went over this in a video, but this evolved, I did. This evolved to how I landed on my preferred timeline, what am I calling it? My timetable layout. So it kind of just all evolved, and I ended up where I am today. But this is the start of what I call the dashboard layout. As you can see, there's just like a lot of stuff on this one page, a lot of little lists, a lot of things and information that I like to have available to me for the week. And something that I liked when I used to do this that I noticed, and I don't know if it's a left-handed, right-handed person thing, I don't know, but I like to put my days over here on the right-hand side. I started out, like you can see, putting them over on the left-hand side. I don't know why I switched. So we're going to do it on the right-hand side now. All right, so I've got all of the days labeled, and we'll come back and do the deco. All right. And the finished spread for what I call the dashboard layout looks a lot like this. And if you'll notice, I do have the days that I mentioned over here on the right hand side. You can opt to put it on the left hand side, right hand side, whichever side works best for you. But I think because I'm left-handed, I prefer to write over here as opposed to on the edge of the book. Either way. But I do remember, as I was using this, the reason why I switched to this type of dashboard layout in the first place is because I noticed that I did not need to have the full width of the page for each day. And going back to the horizontal layout where I mentioned only using half the page for the task and then this other half the page would pretty much be empty, that was exactly the reason why. So this came about because I tried to utilize the extra half a page for something useful, basically. So that's where I added, in this example, my cleaning list. I have a list for things that I was waiting on, or packages that I was waiting on, and then this side area I titled Coming Up, and that was basically for what was going on for the following week. But this space that I allowed for each day was perfect and just fine for allowing me to put in all of my appointments and some high-level tasks. Now, this is useful when you are a person who is definitely using dailies. So on most days, if I were to try to put in all of my daily tasks on this layout, it wouldn't work because there's not enough space available for each day. But if you are using dailies in conjunction with this weekly layout, it should work just fine for you. Over on the left-hand side, I did revisit that rolling weekly, and again, it's not my favorite. I was not a fan of it. This week was actually not a great week in general. As you can see, my workouts dropped off after Tuesday, and I think pretty much the same for the tasks. I probably didn't get much done after Tuesday because of the way I was feeling. Appointments and things still happen, but a lot of those minor items that didn't have to happen, you know, towards the middle to latter part of the week just didn't get done. So this rolling weekly didn't really get filled in much. Again, I do feel like I left myself probably too much space for tasks, but I just really couldn't think of anything else I wanted to put onto this weekly dashboard that would serve me for that week. However, if you're a person who has a lot of little lists to put in, maybe some additional trackers, oh, and that's also important to note. Because I do my tracking someplace else in my planner, I don't have to have tracking on my weeklies. There was a time where I did do weekly tracking, and that's what I would have filled in these spaces and in these areas. So if you are a person who does weekly tracking, for instance, in this bullet journal layout, you would have to add it, you know, in these side areas, and in the horizontal layout, you can add it over on the right hand side of the page where it's open for notes and open for you to customize it however you want. So this will be a good place to add in any trackers as well. So that's how this week shaped up. I didn't hate it necessarily, but I did feel like I wasn't utilizing it to its fullest potential. But if you're someone who likes to have a whole lot of stuff on your layout, which is why I call this a dashboard. It really is a place where you can look and see everything at a glance for that week that's going on, because it allows you a lot of sections and a lot of spots to put in all of that information. So if you're that kind of person, this dashboard layout will work perfectly for you. So the next layout that I'm going to do is vertical. You guessed it. I'm going to use the planner as designed. Surprise, surprise. I am a type of person who kind of shies away from a vertical layout only because I feel like it doesn't afford me a lot of space for all of the information that I like to keep on the layout. So when setting this up, there's not a lot to do. It's already dated, obviously. I could make some space for my list down at the bottom, which I will do because this timetable goes from 6 a.m. to 12 a.m. So, I mean, like after like 9 p.m. on, I don't need anything dated. So, I think I'm going to plan to put all of my lists down here. And the vertical layout. I am not a fan of vertical layouts, or so I thought. And here's why. So I don't like to use the times. I feel like they're very restricting for me. However, if you're a person who needs those times, especially if you like the idea of time blocking, like letting yourself know like this chunk of hours I'm using for this specific task, the vertical layout is amazing for you. If you are a person who doesn't mind writing in these smaller, narrower columns, you'll love the vertical layout, of course. I think I transitioned away from this vertical layout into more of that timetable layout that I currently use, because while I did not need the hours necessarily, I did still like to see how things happened in the day or the order in which they took place. So that's why I switched over to this timetable layout. And it also allowed me to take some elements from that dashboard layout, like some of those lists and things that I still wanted to see on the overview, and it gave me the space to be able to fill that in other areas on the layout, as well as having that timetable. So that's how that whole thing evolved. But if I were to use just the strict vertical layout as it comes, I think that I'm the type of person who would like to use it post planning. Let me explain. So if you like to time block and you want to know how much time you're giving yourself to do each particular task, and maybe on Sunday night you sit down and you do Monday through Saturday or Monday through the next Sunday of, when I'm going to do what, this works beautifully for you. I do that, but I actually do that on a computer. I mentioned it before, and I don't always do this. This year, actually, starting from the beginning of 2024, I have been doing it every single week, but that is helpful for me to know when it's likely I'm going to fit things in. But because, life happens, I do appreciate the flexibility of being able to move tasks and events around, which is why I do that part digitally. So this part I did post planning. So that's what I would consider the pre-planning part, doing it digitally on a calendar. And this is the post planning. So at the end of the day, I came in and I filled in what things happened, and not even always at the end of the day. For instance, let's say this work block. It started at 10 and it went until 1 p.m. So, maybe like around 3 o'clock in the afternoon, I was able to fill in what I did beforehand. So that's what I mean by post planning. So I'm writing down what actually happened in the specified hours that it happened. And I did kind of enjoy this layout because I was able to pull out some of my older like icon stickers. I have some of these larger ones from Happy Planner. The smaller ones are from the Planner Spot. I have a couple from Sweet Caress Designs. And I did use some stamps, added in some color, and I was still able to add in my workouts and dinners. And I did those, again, time specific. So at the time that I worked out, like at the specific time I worked out, at the specific time that we actually ate dinner. So I thought that was kind of cool to have an actual record or account of when things happen. Now with this vertical layout, I knew going in, so when I first set it up, I put the deco here at the bottom, here at the top, because I knew I didn't want anything happening before 9 a.m. on Saturday and Sunday, and this little block here because I knew we had a date night planned. So aside from any of that, I didn't really add any extra deco, and I was wondering if I wanted to include my weekly task list at the bottom. I felt like it might look too cramped if I did, so I gave myself, I guess, the freedom to wait until I saw how the week filled in, and I did eventually opt not to put my task list down at the bottom. I think I could have, but it would have bugged me if this did look like way too full on the page. Maybe it wouldn't have, but I think the thing that would have bugged me the most is because I would likely use 2 columns for the task list in general. I'd have to have maybe like half the task here, half the task here. I don't know. So that would be like 5 here and 5 here. I don't know if I'd like the look of it at the end of the week. Who knows? But if I were to commit to this weekly, I definitely would do some finagling to see, maybe if there's a better layout or a better way to incorporate my weekly tasks on this layout as well. But while I was using it, I didn't even find the need for that weekly layout necessarily. Or let me rephrase that. I didn't find the need for that weekly task list necessarily. I kind of, which you don't see because I erased it. So there were things that I reminded myself of, and I wrote them up here in pencil for specific days. And then as the day came, I actually did fill them in the actual, accounting of what happened for the day. So that's how I was able to adjust to not having that weekly task list on the weekly already. But as I went into this not loving the vertical layout, again, I didn't hate it necessarily, but I just knew that I didn't love it. I actually kind of love it. I kind of like it a lot more, at least a lot more than I did going into this experiment. And I could see myself using this weekly layout and trying to adjust it and zhuzh it so that it works better for my lifestyle, which I think I might do. We'll see. All right, so there was a 6th layout that I decided to incorporate. Originally, when setting up this video, I was only going to do 5, but then I saw Catherine's 2024 planner lineup from Sterling Ink, and she reminded me how much I love this type of layout, inspired by the Nolty 1180 that I actually use in my Passport Traveler's Notebook. and I've always wanted to try this out in a TN kind of size. Nolty actually has a similar planner to this, but I believe it's an A5 Slim, which is wider than Traveler's Notebook, so I never tried out the actual Nolty planner with this layout. But since we're trying out different weeklies, I'm going to take this opportunity to give it a try. So I'm setting it up very simply, very basic, and you have your top section for any day specific items, and then that section at the bottom is generally used for notes, any type of notes, all types of notes. So I'm just adding some extra deco in places where I know it can go, places where I know it won't interfere with all of the information I'll be including on this spread. And then you'll notice that I have that bottom section kind of bordered off, and that's where I intend to note my workouts and my meals. But you'll see that coming up when I show you the after of using this layout for the week. The final layout that we did, I'm calling the Nolty Layout. I don't know what else to call it. I'm calling it the Nolty Layout, and as I suspected, I love it. I love it in the passport size, and I love it even more, I think, in this standard Traveler's Notebook size. It gives me a lot of space for all of the information I need, but I think most importantly, the freedom of having this area in the middle for any kinds of lists and things really appeals to me. So the way I use this, and we're at the end of this week, you will be seeing this video on this day. So of course I had to film a little bit ahead of time, but it's mostly filled in for the most part. And I'll take you through all the sections. But up top, I have the appointments and things that I needed to do. I also decided to incorporate the theme for the day. And that's what I didn't explain. So over here on the vertical layout, I wrote in ahead of time what I was going to do with each day. So this is kind of what I do on my calendar when I do the digital time blocking. I beforehand designate which days are for work, which days are for maybe creating content, which days are for whatever else, running errands. So I will designate that ahead of time, and I did write that in up here, and I liked that, so I carried it over to this weekly, and I did the same thing. So in this section here, designated what this day would be for. So what I would be focusing on for this day. And then right above that, I have things that are timed, things that are appointments. I didn't write down the time for everything, but these are things that I have to actually be present and accountable for. And then right under there are tasks for each specific day. And this has been working out so great for me. I love it. At first I thought that maybe I allowed myself way too much room in this task spot up here, but then as it turns out, I didn't really. I still have enough space in the notes area. I didn't feel like I needed more space. I didn't need 3 or 4 extra lines. So that worked out very well. I did add this deco and these strip stickers. And again, that's another reason why I liked it. I think I was able to utilize the strip stickers from the Sterling ink sticker kits. I don't usually use the strip stickers hardly at all. I've been trying to figure out ways to do that, but this will be a good way for me to use them. And I have some deco in the corners, and then, noted my week number. And also at the bottom, I use those tiny planner spot stickers for workouts and for dinners. And along the bottom, I wrote those in, and I wasn't sure how I would want to lay this out. I knew that I didn't want a whole lot of vertical lines going across the page. I just don't like that. My eyes just don't like it. So I used a gray colored fine liner just to put a little dividing line between those two, between the section for the workouts and for the dinners. I left a few lines on top and bottom of it as kind of like a buffer to, I don't know, bring some white space to my eye. I have no idea why I like it this way. That's what I did, and I like it. It turned out well. I used this spot for the task for the week that I need to get done. And I also did add a little bit of a tracking element here at the bottom. So there's two things that I need to kind of check off, and I want to fill in, let's say this bottom one, I need to do 8 of them. So I have 8 little dots, and I'm going to check off as they come. This is actually a weekend project. So I don't have until here to check them off, but it's still something that I like to see on the weekly layout. Will I need to come back and reference this little tracker later? Probably not, but it's a way for me to track it, to kind of take it out of my brain from counting those items that I need to do. And I just have it right here on the page. And then over here on the left, I added some notes about what I intended to do for one of my work days where I was working outside of the house, and also what I needed to pack with me to bring. So I love the ability to put these notes right here on the weekly in which it relates. Otherwise, I would have put these lists back in my daily pages somewhere, I'm sure, and that would have worked out fine, but I still liked the flexibility and the ability to have them right here on the weekly. So it's safe to say I've fallen in love with this Nolty kind of layout, and I do think I'm going to be using it in the future. So this will work very well for someone who doesn't need to write down a whole lot of daily tasks, for someone who does want the flexibility of a larger note section on the weekly maybe, and you're also able to put in some tracking for day specific items. So I think this layout is very flexible and it probably could appeal to a whole lot of people. So I encourage you to maybe try it out and see if you like it yourself. So at the end, or by the end of this experiment, I've come to understand and realize I do still love and adore my timetable layout. I am still not a fan of the horizontal layout. This bullet journal layout is great when you don't use dailies. Otherwise, it could get redundant and it could feel like a bit of wasted space. This dashboard layout is great if you have a whole lot going on. And I can also imagine if you are a parent and you have kids' schedules that you kind of need to keep track of, like if, you know, Tuesdays there's soccer for one and there's gymnastics for the other on Wednesday, that might be good to have on this whole dashboard. And that's exactly why I consider it like a dashboard layout. So if you need to have a whole lot of information on one spread, this is amazing. For the vertical layout, I think it's a lot more fun if you let it be. So if you're using the stickers, it could be a lot more fun. It is an accounting of what happened for your day. So if you're really into that kind of thing, it would be great for you. Or even if you're into pre-planning and plotting out how your week is going to go far ahead of time, this would be a great layout for you as well. And then, like I mentioned, the versatility of the Nolty type of layout, I do think is absolutely amazing. So in this whole experiment, the Sterling Ink Common Planner has proven to be very helpful because of the light lines on the layout. You can kind of draw over everything and do whatever the heck you want it. So like on these other days where you saw I whited out those dates up at the top and then just added in my own dates and everything, the layout and the grid lines were very helpful for that. Of course, there are people who probably think that the lines in general are way too light because of that reason, but you know, we can't have it all, or can we? I don't know. But that's how all of the weeklies shaped up for me. All right, so you've seen them all. I actually did find this experiment very eye-opening and enlightening for me. It kind of solidified certain things that I knew about myself and what I prefer in my planner, and it also did open my eyes to some newer things that I hadn't considered before. And if not for doing this actual experiment, I probably would not have realized it ever. Most importantly though, I do hope that this video has been helpful for you. If you've come across some things or some ideas that you had never thought of, or some realizations that kind of were solidified for you as well, leave that down in the comments. I really would be interested in finding out what your journey has been like with figuring out what you like in a planner and what you don't like, what you hate, what you've tolerated and suffered through because you spent a lot of money on said planner. Leave it down in the comments so we can talk about it, because we've all been there. Will you be trying out any of these layouts? Let me know. Thank you so much for watching along with today's video. And if you did enjoy this content, please don't forget to like and subscribe if you are so inclined. And you may also want to check out this video that I think you'll find equally interesting. Again, thank you so much for following along on today's video, and I'll see you in the next one.